the next session to the moderator, Ms. Jennifer Thompson. She will moderate the Space Technologies and Sustainable Development Goals session, the development of space ecosystem to ensure the food security, the boost agriculture, and reduce poverty. Ladies and gentlemen, as in the opening, I mentioned that this forum is being organized in a partnership of Space Foundation, which is a global resource for education and teacher training. They are our partners in this forum, and they are throughout this, they are helping us, so we really appreciate their cooperation with us. So let me introduce Ms. Jennifer Thompson. Ms. Jennifer Thompson is a communications director for Starfish Space, a satellite servicing company focused on building the first small, versatile, and affordable space tug called Otter. Jennifer and the team at Starfish hope to influence the rapidly growing on-orbit ecosystem by supporting satellite assets through active life expansion and space debris removal, ensuring important and critical capabilities continue on Earth. Ms. Jennifer, thank you very much to be with us. The floor is yours to moderate next session. Thank you very much. Please.
Thank you, and welcome to session 2 of the Global Space Science Forum. I'm very excited to be with you here today. Hello to everyone attending from around the world. Today's topic is not only interesting, it's very important. Developing the space ecosystem to ensure food security, boost agriculture, and reduce poverty. What we do in space can and does improve life on Earth. Today we have 5 speakers sharing expert perspectives. First to speak with us today, we have Mr. Lars Hoffman, Senior Vice President of Global Launch Services for Rocket Lab. He is based in the United States. Mr. Hoffman is a corporate senior executive and former United States Air Force senior officer and test pilot. He brings with him more than 30 years of experience in national security and aerospace, following a distinguished U.S. Air Force career and corporate executive roles in the commercial space sector. Mr. Hoffman joins Rocket Lab from his most recent role at SpaceX, where he was responsible for national security, space strategy, and business development as Senior Director of Government Sales. Mr. Hoffman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and welcome and good morning to Your Excellencies, our distinguished colleagues, your friends. It's my pleasure to present an introduction to Rocket Lab. Let me see if I can share my screen. There we go. And the title of my presentation today is Speed to Space, Dedicated Launch for Small Satellites on Electron, which is our small launch vehicle for Rocket Lab. And the intent here is to share with this audience how we at Rocket Lab are opening up access to space to improve life here on Earth. This comes from our founder, our Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Peter Beck. His quote here is particularly applicable to today's discussion. Our motto at Rocket Lab is, we go to space to improve life on Earth, and that's captured in Pete's quote to the right. So what is the challenge for getting to space to improve life here on Earth? One of the trends that we've noted over the last decade is a number of smaller and smaller satellites that can produce great capabilities in science from space, but are having trouble getting to space. This is the problem that Rocket Lab wanted to address. In fact, there's a recent study that noted over the last 5 years that delays on average as many as 128 days are preventing these small satellites from getting to their orbit and providing that very valuable information to humanity here on Earth. Rocket Lab's solution is to develop a launch system but more than a launch system, an end-to-end space company that includes a launch on our Electron launch vehicle, space systems, which include our Photon spacecraft, satellite components, and applications that can provide this valuable information to improve life here on Earth across many different sectors. This is a brief overview of Rocket Lab, a company that's been around since 2006, and we've been launching our Electron launch vehicle since 2017. Thus far, we've had 21 launches and delivered 105 satellites to orbit, including 2 satellites of our own. We've also opened up multiple launch pads at 2 different launch locations, and we have sites around the world that I'll touch on briefly here in a moment. We've also been able to bring back the booster of our Electron launch vehicle for future reuse, and we'll be doing more of that in the years to come. This slide shows our locations around the world. I'm speaking to you today from near our headquarters in Long Beach, California. We have a launch complex at Wallops Island, Virginia, on the east coast of the United States. And our primary launch complex that we've been using thus far is located in New Zealand. We have a production complex in New Zealand, a mission control in New Zealand, and a propulsion test complex in New Zealand. In the United States, besides our headquarters here in Long Beach, we have a couple of companies that we have acquired recently that add to our portfolio, including Sinclair Interplanetary in Toronto, Canada, that produces exquisite reaction wheels and star trackers, among other spacecraft components. And recently, we've acquired Advanced Solutions Incorporated in Colorado that produces software for interplanetary space travel. Besides our locations around the world, we have a global tracking network that we have developed for our own purposes and to support our customers. And we partner with KSAT, the largest ground segment in the world, to provide ground segment services to all of our customers. In the pictures to the right, you can see our headquarters factory in the upper left-hand corner in picture number 1. And you can see our factory at Auckland, New Zealand in the picture number 6, as well as our mission control center in picture number 7, and a similar mission control center in our headquarters here in Long Beach. A little bit more detail about the Electron launch vehicle. The Electron launch vehicle is revolutionary in its design. It uses pre-printed or 3D printed engines with electric pumps to make them very small and efficient and very lightweight to produce the maximum capability to deliver payloads to orbit. Another feature of our Electron launch vehicle is the carbon fiber body, which is 40% lighter than similarly sized aluminum rocket bodies. We have 9 of our Rutherford engines on the first stage and 1 Rutherford engine on our second stage. On top of our second stage is a third stage we call the kick stage. The kick stage is used to deliver the payloads to their final orbit and precisely insert them into orbit, whether they are CubeSats or microsatellites. And we're able to design missions to include different configurations of microsatellites and CubeSats. You can see also our bifurcated fairing that separates during the climb to orbit. Shown here is some of the performance of the Electron launch vehicle. We are quite capable of delivering payloads to low Earth orbit between 300 kilometers altitude and 1,200 kilometers altitude. We can deliver payloads to different altitudes on the same launch, as a matter of fact. And we are able to deliver up to 300 kilograms to low Earth orbit. With our kick stage, we have evolved that into a higher energy or higher performance spacecraft and kick stage known as Photon that can deliver payloads beyond Earth orbit, as I'll discuss briefly. Our business is comprised of approximately half commercial and half government, including 30% national security and 20% civil, primarily the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. We've delivered payloads for a number of different customers, both on the government and on the commercial segment, as shown on the left, including multiple missions for NASA, multiple missions for the Air Force and Space Force, the National Reconnaissance Office, and others from the US government, and a number of commercial customers from around the world, including Black Sky, who we are in the middle of a campaign of launching multiple satellites for their constellation. Synspective from Japan, Canon from Japan as well, Capella Space from the US, and OHB from Europe. So we have customers from around the world. Rocket Lab, you may not realize, has been launching quite frequently and is in fact the second most frequently launched rocket in the US and the fourth most frequently launched rocket in the world over the last few years. We are on a cadence right now launching approximately once a month going forward into 2022 and 2023. We are really responding to market demand. We are able to produce a rocket about every 20 days and able to launch at least once a month with the capacity to grow to deliver payloads and launches on a weekly basis. Now, how do we do that? We've got two launch complexes, one in New Zealand, as you can see here, and one in Wallops Island, Virginia, and I'll touch on those a little bit more in the next slide. But before that, I'd like to spend just a moment to talk about the importance of dedicated small launch. Dedicated launch is critical for a number of our customers that need to be launched precisely on time or precisely to the specific orbit, or frequently if they're launching a constellation and need to phase that constellation precisely onto orbit. Dedicated launch offers a lot of these advantages that you cannot find on typical rideshare missions where it's a large mix of customers that are going to various orbits. And that's the value proposition that Rocket Lab offers to its customers and has been well received by the market. To be able to deliver that capability to all of our customers globally, we have these two launch complexes, one in New Zealand that includes two pads, as you can see in the upper picture here, and a license to launch as many as 120 times per year from the Federal Aviation Administration. That's a launch every 72 hours if required. We have multiple payload processing facilities on site, so we are able to have multiple customers on site and launching quite frequently. The picture down below on the right side is our launch complex and our launch pad at Wallops Island, Virginia, that will begin operations in 2022. And we are licensed to launch as many as 12 times per year from the FAA from that launch site. So all totaled, 132 launch opportunities per year from our two launch complexes. The advantage of these complexes is they're quite remote, especially the one in New Zealand, which offers the frequency of launch unparalleled anywhere on Earth. The other feature of Rocket Lab that allows us to deliver these payloads and these launches so frequently is a very streamlined, state-of-the-art manufacturing facility. We manufacture in the United States at our Long Beach headquarters the engines and the avionics, which are then shipped to Auckland to our production complex where the rocket bodies are manufactured and assembled. We do all of our engine testing and stack testing in New Zealand before we launch from our New Zealand launch complex. And we look for ways to gain efficiency throughout the whole process. In the lower right corner, you can see two of our technicians working with a large tooling that autonomously finishes the rocket body, all of the trimming, all of the drilling that what previously had taken as long as 400 hours and now takes less than 24 hours through automation. And we seek to gain those advantages throughout our whole manufacturing process. In our US headquarters, for example, we additively manufacture the engines using state-of-the-art 3D printers, and we can print multiple parts simultaneously and around the clock, which allows us to produce a set of engines every 17 days. I'd like now to touch on just a few case studies of customers that we have launched over the last year to year and a half that have experienced the benefits of this dedicated small launch. The first is at the end of January 2020 with the National Reconnaissance Office launching outside of the United States for the first time. This was a very successful mission. It was one that was years in the making. The National Reconnaissance Office, as many of you know, is a very discriminating customer in the intelligence community of the United States national security space community. And they had examined Rocket Lab for several years before deciding to launch with Rocket Lab, especially launching outside of the United States. I was there personally for this launch. It was a very thrilling experience and a very successful mission on orbit. The next case study is a Japanese company called Synergistics that came to us with an urgent need to launch within 6 months. A payload that is actually quite large. In fact, it was so large that we had to modify our fairing to fit their spacecraft within our fairing. We were able to do that, and we were able to launch Synergistics within 6 months. and they are a very satisfied customer that is talking to us about future launch opportunities. Next is a German company called OHB that again came to us with an urgent need to launch within 6 months, and we were able to deliver their satellite successfully to orbit within that time period. The reason I mention these two case studies is to illustrate how rapidly we can go from the initial conversation with a customer to successfully delivering their precious payload on orbit. This is a new era that we are in today that is unlike the launch cadence of the past, where sometimes it would take years before payload could be delivered to orbit. Now the pacing activities typically are payload readiness or licensing to be able to manifest the payload and deliver it on orbit. We've been able to manifest CubeSat customers within 3 months of launch and successfully deliver them to their orbit. The next case study is a constellation customer, Black Sky. We are in the middle of their launch campaign. In fact, our next launch for Black Sky is coming up on November 11th in New Zealand, November 10th in the United States, and it is the middle part of this campaign to launch their constellation or much of their constellation to orbit. And finally, another constellation customer, Kineis, came to us a couple of years ago. We worked with them quite closely to custom build a solution for their needs to deliver their Internet of Things constellation consisting of 25 satellites that we were able to configure 5 satellites per launch over 5 launches in 2023 to deliver their constellation on orbit. That set of launches is coming up in the spring of 2023. The other highlight that I'd like to share with you is our kick stage that we've developed into our spacecraft called Photon. Now, Photon is built upon the foundation of the kick stage, as you can see in the upper picture there, the white foundation that you see, that allows us to improve the components on board, add things such as solar panels, additional power storage, communications capability, positioning and pointing capabilities to deliver a fully fledged satellite to orbit. In the lower left corner picture, you can see the first Photon that we delivered to orbit in August of last year that's functioning on orbit today. So we've got 2 satellites on orbit, 2 Photon satellites on orbit with 8 in our backlog right now, many of those for NASA and other customers that are demanding of the highest order of capability of small spacecraft. I mentioned our first Photon spacecraft that was delivered on orbit in August of last year. That launch included the delivery of a Capella Sequoia spacecraft that is a synthetic aperture radar sensor to orbit before operating the Photon spacecraft as a separate spacecraft on orbit. The next launch of a Photon was in March of 2021 with what we call the Pathstone version of Photon. What we did for this one was to configure all of the components into a small form factor, as you can see in the lower left picture, and launch this on a mission with other payloads that we delivered to orbit, and then converted the Photon spacecraft into an operating spacecraft on orbit, and is still in operation today. These are leading us down a path of developing a much more sophisticated and higher energy version of Photon for this mission, this NASA mission called Capstone, which is delivering that 12U spacecraft that you see on the top of the Photon spacecraft into a translunar inject trajectory to deliver that 12U to lunar orbit. This is a mission in support of the Artemis program. In fact, it's the first mission of the Artemis program, and it's putting this 12U spacecraft into a near rectilinear halo orbit around the moon to demonstrate the feasibility of that orbit for the future Gateway mission into the similar orbit. To do this, we took our original kick stage that I showed you earlier and added much larger fuel tanks, a larger engine, and other upgrades to enable it to go beyond Earth orbit. This is demonstrating the capability of delivering Photon spacecraft on an Electron small launch vehicle to destinations beyond Earth orbit. In fact, we have a mission to Venus planned in 2023, and we've got 2 Photon spacecraft that were configured to fly to Mars on a larger launch vehicle in 2024. So what's next after opening up space for small spacecraft into low Earth orbit and beyond? We realized through our market research that there was a need for a larger launch vehicle. So we've introduced the Neutron launch vehicle that we believe is ideally suited to address a large segment of the market between now and the end of the decade. According to market research, we believe there are our Neutron launch vehicle will be able to address a large percentage of that market, especially the constellation customers. For example, we use the Telesat Lightspeed broadband constellation as an exemplar of these commercial constellations and similar government constellations that will be launched between now and the end of the decade. In this case, 220 satellites going into 20 different orbital planes, 11 satellites per plane, allows us to manifest 11 satellites per launch on the Neutron launch vehicle and deliver those to fill out 1 plane per launch. It's a very efficient way to build out a constellation, and our commercial customers and government customers are very excited to watch Neutron as it develops over the next few years before its first launch in 2024. To give you some perspective on where Neutron fits in the portfolio of launch vehicles, you can see Electron, our small launch vehicle, which we will continue to launch to service the small end of the market, microsatellites and CubeSats, and a Falcon 9 for perspective, and Neutron fitting in right in between as a medium launch vehicle, similar to the Delta II that launched for many years successfully. We believe that between Neutron and Electron, we will be able to address 98% of the market that needs to be launched between now and 2029. We have a significant update on our Neutron launch vehicle program coming in the next few weeks. So I encourage you to pay attention to the update as we unveil a lot more details about the Neutron launch vehicle and our Neutron program. Now, Neutron is designed to deliver 8 tons to low Earth orbit and return to its launch site as a reusable launch vehicle, nearly 100% reusable. And we are developing other scenarios where we can deliver more payload to low Earth orbit and to other orbits. With a 5-meter fairing, it's sized just right to deliver these constellation customers and larger payloads to Earth orbits and beyond, including 1,500 kilograms capacity capability to Venus or Mars, or 2,000 kilograms to lunar orbit. So we look forward to unveiling an update on Neutron in the near future, and design, building, and launching in 2024 from Virginia as our initial launch site. With that, I'd like to thank you for your time and attention, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this very distinguished group, and I am happy to answer any further questions. If you'd like to learn more about Rocket Lab or to reach out and contact us at Rocket Lab, you can find us on the web at www.rocketlabusa.com. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lars, so much. That was really wonderful to learn about Photon and the NASA capstone for Artemis, Venus in 2023, and Neutron as a reusable rocket. So thank you, that was wonderful. All right, next we have Mr. David E. Thomas. He's the Executive Director of the Milo Space Science Institute. He is based in Scottsdale, Arizona, United States. As a business unit manager, entrepreneur, and executive, Mr. Thomas is motivated to help organizations increase their impact. He led the Milo Space Science Institute, designed and built Arizona's largest mass vaccination site in only 6 days, and developed a public deployment operational model for COVID-19 testing with Arizona State University's Biodesign Institute. And now I'm excited to hand the stage to Mr. Thomas.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. I want to thank the organizers of this very important event for the opportunity to speak today, and welcome the distinguished guests. The Milo Space Science Institute was created to provide affordable access to space science. We recognize that there is a tremendous need for more missions for the growing number of scientists, engineers, and students that would like to participate in space science, but otherwise have limited opportunities to do so. We recognize that in order to be effective in space science, there's a need for three things within the space ecosystem. One is a skilled workforce, another is the ability to deliver technology that works, and finally, one needs access to space missions. So we are working in close collaboration with Lockheed Martin. We are able to provide access to space science missions. We have 3 designed and are working on others. The first is called Lunar Ride. This is a ride share to the surface of the moon via the Commercial Lunar Payload Services program. And in this program, Lockheed Martin provides the Milo Institute with excess volume that we in turn are able to give to our partners and members. So individual organizations, universities, space agencies can access a few kilograms, for example, and be transported to the surface of the moon with for their payloads. We have another mission called Apophis Pathfinder. Apophis is a very interesting near-Earth object that will come very close to Earth in 2029. In fact, it'll come between the moon and the Earth. And we would like to do a precursor mission a few years prior to that near-Earth encounter. We have a third mission design called NeoShare, which would access several near-Earth objects and do flybys of multiple objects. But really what I want to talk to you about today is the need to be able to grow the capacity of the space ecosystem across the world. And this is not just in emerging spacefaring nations, but also in mature spacefaring nations. There is a gap, and we've recognized this gap, and we are working diligently to try and resolve and to create an ecosystem. We have a program that has 3 main components. The first is what we call a mission academy. Its focus is training the workforce. The second component is a payload accelerator. Its focus is maturing technologies. And then finally, we offer a project office. With the Mission Academy, we go from essentially concept to design. In the accelerator, we go from design to prototype and to prototype demonstration. And in the project office, we support things like identification of science objectives, the build and test of flight-ready hardware, and mission operations. We're very fortunate at Arizona State University to have the principal investigator for MASCAM-Z, the vision system for Mars Rover Perseverance. We have a mission operations center. We've been honored to support the UAE mission, the HOPE mission, with instrumentation, and so we're able to bring our scientists and engineers in support of these programs and convey and translate knowledge to organizations around the globe. Our ultimate goal is to provide a trained workforce to offer opportunity for new ventures to be formed and ultimately to enhance the supply chain. I want to speak a little bit about the Mission Academy, which is a very intensive online training program. We are able to accommodate between 200 and 500 students, and they go through a very rigorous process that takes them from the payload concept all the way to a preliminary design review. We start with a destination. So for example, one of the programs that we've designed is an Earth observing satellite, and the challenge includes science objectives that would support things like monitoring agriculture or coastlines or the presence of water in various areas. This frames the activities for the students such that they're learning very practical and very transferable skills. We like to say that the skills that these students are learning and are around team building, problem solving, and these are transferable to the challenges that we face on Earth. So the outcomes from this Mission Academy have been just quite extraordinary. We've now had over 5,000 students that have gone through the Academy. It's had a 94% completion rate. And we are now able to offer this to international partners. We're quite proud of the fact that we have reached 40% of the students are female, 41% are students of color. So we are truly supporting the next generation of space explorer and problem solver here on Earth. What we're doing is we're encouraging, we're inspiring the next generation of scientists, engineers, technicians, and we are, very diverse in the team composition. So we want to include media and communications experts. What we realize is that the individuals that are creating guidance and control systems for a Mars rover can use that same technology for autonomous systems. The engineers who are developing communications can use that knowledge and learning for applications here on Earth. Once the teams have completed the Academy, we offer the next step, which is to mature their designs from the preliminary design review to a prototype. And we culminate the payload accelerator with what we call a demonstration event. This allows the space agency to kind of survey the capabilities. Typically, we'll have 10 or more teams that are going through the accelerator, offering ideas and maturing their capabilities. We're engaging these teams with mentors from industry, so they're learning concepts that will help them support the life cycle in their nation. What we're seeing is extraordinary return on investment. We see sponsorship from government agencies to advance the technologies. We see relationships, public-private partnerships are formed, new ventures and acquisitions. We've performed this internationally, and we've seen capabilities that have been delivered in Asian countries as well as UK and Europe. And we, again, are attempting to create an ecosystem where the knowledge transfer has applicability to space science, but we're also thinking about the terrestrial applications. We refer to this as dual use application. We think about the science, we think about the engineering that's going to be required to perform, for example, on the moon or in a near-Earth object encounter, but these same capabilities can support companies and new ventures here on Earth and therefore create economic impact. The Lunar Ride mission is going to be launching in 2024. There'll be a series of launches that will occur in the coming years. There'll be multiple opportunities to engage in ride shares, to carry payloads to the moon. Apophis Pathfinder will be a very important event, as I mentioned, in the 2029 timeframe, actually coming April 2029. And that will be an object that's roughly 400 meters. It will not hit Earth this time, but eventually our scientists believe that it will, probably not in 100 years, maybe not in 1,000 years. But this is a very important object from the perspective of planetary defense, and so it'll be important to understand things perhaps like mass. So in conclusion, we have created a series of programs that are creating skilled professionals. We're creating mission opportunities, and we're encouraging public-private partnerships around the world. I really want to highlight the last two bullet points on this slide, which is to say that we are leveraging the inspiration, which is space. We are encouraging students to engage in space science. We recognize that the knowledge that will be gained will actually assist here on Earth in areas like food security and agriculture. And we are intentionally creating programs that will leave an economic impact within the countries with which we partner. So I want to thank you very much for your time. I'm very grateful again for the opportunity. Please feel free to reach out if there's anything we can do to assist the aerospace endeavors. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, David, so much. I love the work you're doing at Arizona State, from inspiring students all the way to the really cool space applications you're working on. So well done. All right, next we have the pleasure of hearing from Dr. Jennifer Fogerty. Director of Applied Health and Extreme Environment, Synergistics, LLC, a human-centered design firm specializing in the integration of human factors, engineering, and human health and performance into a business model. She is based in Houston, Texas, United States. Dr. Fogerty's division develops and expands the application of medical technologies to remote medicine, telemedicine, and home health care. This empowers users by incorporating precision medicine and cutting-edge science and technology with actionable data to all users, medical providers, patients, athletes, and anyone that desires a healthy, high-quality life. Dr. Fogerty has over 20 years of experience in medical physiology and extreme environments, and was most recently the NASA Human Research Program Chief Scientist. She led the development and oversight of an extensive research portfolio addressing human system risks to enable space exploration. This position required a vision for the most austere and remote type of medicine. Dr. Fogerty, we are excited to hear your talk. The floor is yours.
Hello, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to be speaking here at the Global Space Science Forum. It's an amazing event. I've really enjoyed the speakers that have gone before me. And we are going to enjoy a talk that's a little different. I think we've heard a lot about opportunities to fly in space, which of course, incredibly important. What I have focused my career, and most recently my new company, Human-Centered Design, is about human spaceflight. And it is an incredibly challenging endeavor. The humans require some special care. They are very robust, but equally fragile. And it's an interesting dichotomy that we face here on our planet, which is why there's a very strong relationship between how we enable human spaceflight and the benefits it brings back to Earth to solve some pretty extreme challenges, especially as we move forward. So of course, we're going to start here with planet Earth. It's an image I put forward just to remind ourselves of not only the beauty of the planet, but its richness, the variety of things it provides humans to survive. And it does change over time, similar to the humans. And we have been challenged with how we've altered the planet to try to understand maybe we need to change direction to enable a future here. It's very common for astronauts, commercial astronauts most recently, to comment on their perspective and how it changes when you do leave the planet and you look back upon it. And maybe some preconceived notions about how we determine where lines are drawn and where we are divided rather than united. And I think human spaceflight takes us to a little different place. It has quite a different function we'll talk about in a second. Because when your challenge is to go to a place such as Mars, I think you can understand the juxtaposition, meaning the comparison between the two planets, that this is not only austere, it's hostile. It's not a place we can go and walk off a space vehicle and settle a habitat easily. As we know from the rovers, the regolith is a challenging environment. The lack of readily usable resources means that we have to solve a lot of problems before we can go here and establish any type of colonization. So there's a place we're going to go first, which is back to the moon. And understand the relationship between the Earth, the moon, and Mars, and establishing the human capability to not only explore space, but improve our circumstances here on Earth so that we can sustain life here while we continue to explore the universe. So for me, human spaceflight functions to inspire and unite rather than divide and challenge. And I think we should talk about some tangible examples. I think the opportunities we heard about with launch capability or collaborative and educational pursuits, are the engine that make things go. But how do we understand the why? How do we understand the tangibleness of what we're going to accomplish? And why is human space exploration such a forcing function? So of course, some of these images should be familiar to you. The one on the left is the Curiosity rover on the surface of Mars, looking back after making its treks. The picture in the middle is from Apollo 11, and that is a boot print and a boot on the surface of the moon. And the right is that casted boot print that talks about the sustainability on a lunar surface. So currently our job is to turn rover tracks into boot prints, but it's a process to get there. We're not quite ready yet. I think we're capable, clearly with Artemis and the launch capability, to return to the lunar surface, but sustainability and then utilization on the lunar surface to learn how to do it is a whole nother question, and is going to require a global village to get there. So we have to talk about some of the challenges we face, both in low Earth orbit, in deep space, in lunar orbit, that really make it a hostile environment that raise the bar to the types of challenges we have to solve. And even in session 1, we heard about some of the activities that go on to monitor the environment and then interpret the impact of the environment on the human. Space radiation, galactic cosmic rays, solar particle events, all fall under this radiation umbrella. And it can be incredibly hostile to living things. We study them currently in cells, animal models, and even humans that fly in space. The discipline of radiobiology has taught us a lot, even on Earth, with treatment of, say, cancer with radiation. It can be a tool used to promote health, but it can also be damaging to the collateral tissue nearby. And in that case, both the space industry and modern medicine have a common challenge, which is how to keep tissue, healthy tissue that's exposed to radiation, healthy going forward. There are a variety of tools that can be used. It can be prevention in terms of things that we think of like shielding. It could be pharmaceuticals that can go in and help the body repair its damage. And it can even be genomics in terms of inducing the body to what's called upregulate its own capacity to repair its DNA. All of those are possible, but it's understanding which ones we can enable and how safe they are. Because in spaceflight, the other aspect of the challenge is that for every action you take, there's an equal and opposite reaction. You cannot defy the laws of physics, even in space. And so you really need to understand what other risks you induce when you do something like a countermeasure, particularly in my field along the lines of pharmaceuticals. You may solve one risk while you cause another. So in a human-centered design sense, you need to really understand your approach holistically. And then we're going to start to talk about the other challenges, because from a human perspective, none of these exposures happen individually. It is field research, and they're happening simultaneously. So altered gravity fields, humans have evolved on planet Earth with 1G exposure. And that's a number, but everything we compare to it is relative. So low Earth orbit is considered microgravity, near zero, you're in constant free fall. Lunar gravity, only 1/6 of what we feel and experience on the Earth's surface. Deep space will also be zero or microgravity, constant free fall, unless we substitute artificial gravity, which has some engineering challenges I'm not really prepared to discuss, not being an engineer. But I do have a lot of experience with trying to understand how to test paradigms where artificial gravity might be appropriate. That should be another talk for another day. A Mars surface, 3As. The question is there a G threshold? Will the human body be able to perceive gravity and for it to be useful in terms of mitigate some of the atrophy that we see when you're in constant microgravity, which in some cases your body adapts to, in other cases it maladapts. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the medical section. Hostile enclosed environment. These vehicles we create, whether it's in low Earth orbit, lunar surface, or going deep space for travel to a planet like Mars, it's actually an exoplanet. You have to be prepared to construct this vehicle for the human to provide it everything it needs to survive. The air, the water, the food, the psychological stimulation that we require, that's going to be taken away for long periods of time. And as you note in this image, that will become your view of Earth. It will become a pin dot of light and no longer available to you as a refuge. That's a dramatic shift, and it's been written about quite extensively in the psychological domain to discuss the impact. And again, as the astronauts talk about, their view of Earth is something that touches them in an emotional and spiritual place when they go on spaceflight journeys. When you lose that view of Earth, exactly how are you going to respond? And how can we prepare astronauts for that ahead of time? We often discuss the physical aspects of spaceflight, but we really need to address also the psychological, just as we have noted here on Earth. Maintaining mental health and resilience is an inherently important part of keeping people functional. So while they explore the universe, they can function well. They have jobs to do. They're going to be engineers, astronomers, scientists. And those things will be important parts of what they do, and we need to keep them ready to do them because the mission will change over time. So the isolation and confinement, being in a small area together with maybe 4 to 5 of your best friends in the early missions, can be quite a challenging endeavor. And we train people, we train NASA astronauts in my domain, for very long periods of time together. We understand what an important part that is to create team cohesion. But in other cases, we're talking about commercial astronauts and dynamic changeover of teams, more like the polar expeditions. And so what will that look like when you're in an extreme austere environment? And we learn from places like Antarctica and the Arctic. Distance from Earth. As I mentioned, not only will your view of Earth as you go deeper into space be a pin dot, but the ability to come back to Earth if there were a critical failure gets taken away because of orbital mechanics. And we've had to understand what death on orbit means. If something were to go terribly wrong and a crew member were to die during the mission, we may not be able to return. And there are different decisions to be made, especially in the medical domain when you have constrained resources. It's called rationing, just as we've discussed here with the pandemic. What does that mean to have to make decisions because you're going to be gone on a mission like Mars for 2 to 3 years? You only have so many antibiotics. You only have so much medication or medical resources. Could you use them all up on a dying crew member? Is that the appropriate choice to make? So that's another element of the psychological choices that not only will we face in spaceflight to an extreme extent, but we face here on Earth daily. And what are the paradigms that we use to make those decisions? How do we help guide people in those processes? So when we talk about solutions, what should they look like? Well, they need to be robust. These are extremely hostile environments. I've heard the word autonomy used, and I keep on meaning to add automation as well, which are slightly different. Autonomous means it can act without you. Like artificial intelligence, it's capable of deciding. And that even reflects upon the crew. They should be able to function without mission control in some cases, because at times the communication will not allow something on Earth, such as a mission control center, to help the crew members do their job. In other cases, the capabilities, such in the case of robotics or operations on the vehicle itself, should be automated. Maybe even the crew shouldn't need to be dealing with it because they have science and work to do. Light and lean, launch mass has been mentioned. When we think about trying to get stuff off of Earth, it's very costly. Hardest part. The biggest arguments in my career have been about launching water for the crew, which we're going to get to in terms of recycling. Comprehensive, going back to we can't have a single solution for every problem. If you need to monitor the water quality and the air quality and biomarkers in people's blood and urine, they should not be a different device. They should be able to answer different questions depending on what solution you put into them, but they need to be comprehensive. And it is possible, especially with something like spectrographic images. But we have to change the way we do business, and we have to change the way we understand how we interpret data. That goes to the next line, data and predictive analytics driven. We have to collect the data. And this is why low Earth orbit and lunar activities such as the Artemis plan for sustainable lunar operations is so important. That's where we have to put in the work to be able to predict the future. We're not going to be capable of doing a mock Mars mission. When we go, but how will it be data informed? Also, agile and responsive to changing environment. We're moving between environments sometimes very slowly and sometimes incredibly rapidly. We launch on the order of minutes from Earth gravity to microgravity. Then we might be in transit in microgravity for very long periods of time, similar to how we stay on the International Space Station, which is why it's an ideal test bed in some cases. And then we're shifting people, if we land on a planetary surface, back into a gravity field. And those shifts, when they're very rapid, can be very provocative. And trying to help the crew manage that adaptation is one of our jobs. And that is also similar here on Earth. Sometimes we have sustained chronic exposure, and sometimes we have very acute and abrupt changes. And we need to understand both in the human response. So we've worked on the International Space Station on the goal of going from Earth to Mars for a long time, trying to fill in some blanks. We have looked at the field of precision medicine and genomics. Of course, we have water recycling, which has been incredibly successful. And I think there's some opportunities to bring some spin back to Earth. We're growing vegetables, not only to feed the crew, but it's actually a psychological benefit to be able to grow something and nurture something and have the benefit of a crop yield at the end. We can do medical care. We use a given tool that's very friendly to what's called telemedicine or remote medicine, which is ultrasound. And I think NASA has spent, and actually CSA have spent, a considerable amount of time optimizing the use of ultrasound in ways that has never been driven by Earth, because you have access to large devices such as an MRI or a CAT scan. You're not going to have that luxury in spaceflight, as you don't in austere and remote locations for medical care. So we keep on moving forward with the use of ultrasound in many capacities that is not a traditional use. And of course, we have a lot of care that's self-care. So one of those pictures is an astronaut dealing with an eye exam that can be self-administered. And the data goes back to the expert. So the device should be very simple, almost commercial off-the-shelf level, but it's about the data getting back to someone who can interpret it and do diagnosis and give direction to the person doing the self-care. That's important. So the challenges of human space exploration really drive innovation because of the constraints that are present. So we're going to talk a little bit more about air, water, food, medical care, and how those solutions can really address Earth challenges. So on the station, they recycle the air. They have to remove the carbon dioxide, which is clearly a big issue on Earth. They continue to refine that carbon dioxide removal. Even for Artemis, the levels at which we require for human exposure are the lowest ever by standards and requirements, pushing the envelope on technology and driving CO2 capture capability. The water is reclamated, urine is recovered, condensate is recovered, and it needs to be purified. But the operations are quite large, quite cumbersome, and have to be replaced. They're changing the methodology to different capillary beds in the first picture, and forward osmosis in the second picture, which was an ESA experiment, and now there's going to be a patent filed, and the forward osmosis seems to be much more efficient than reverse osmosis, and is really ripe for use here on Earth. I mentioned the food, the vegetable growth, in very small spaces getting the crop yield, and also dense nutrient content to give people the nutrient they need. The preserved foods that you see in the middle, drinking out of a bag or eating out of a bag, while it might not be the most luxurious, it's very functional and nutritious. And it's something that for deployment under emergency conditions has really been optimized in a collaboration with the Department of Defense and the US side to kind of move past the calorie dense meals ready to eat, what are known as MREs, to give a little bit better quality for emergency rations. And then of course to the right is another agricultural experiment that was looking how to keep the plants fed well, but under very austere conditions in terms of you don't have acres of soil to plant in and tons of water to provide. You got to deal with small amounts and get the highest crop yield possible. And then on the medical care side, I mentioned the ultrasound to the right, that's a self-care and eye exam, but there's also been the development of what's called IV generation, taking potable water, drinkable water, and turning it into IV solution for medical care on an as-needed basis, which would be ideal for places that don't have hospital capability when you need to provide acute medical care. So really, in these types of scenes, when it's incredibly austere, you have to step back and think about the things you need to know. You know, whether you're a company who's developing a technology or a government who's trying to fly an astronaut, the design has to be really informed by many aspects of what the human's going to require to be successful. And you have to understand some pretty nuanced things about how the body adapts, how it regulates itself, and how it meets the challenges it's faced with in something like an austere environment. And then you deal with a lot of data about probability, so you can predict the future with confidence. You're never going to be 100% right, but you can be data informed. You don't want to rely on being lucky, because your luck is going to run out. And then how do we monitor people over time? Because you are changing, and it goes back to the predictions. And the medical architecture, again, it has to be rationed. Before you go, you're going to have to make decisions about what's going to be in your medical kit. And it's going to be the size of a backpack, and how diverse it has to be. When I talked about comprehensive earlier, it doesn't mean that the capability is only good for medical care. Maybe it's also monitoring the vehicle environment. And then, of course, how do you build in agility? And we can discuss things in the future about 3D printing, multi-purpose tools, and even pre-positioning. How do you get smart about how you provide those resources? The ISS has been an amazing learning platform, and moving into lunar orbit is going to be a really exciting opportunity to expand capabilities and also learn about the more austere environments, and also change some of the variables. I know back when I was working for NASA, we very much wanted to include things as communication delay. There'll be a natural component to it because of the near rectilinear orbit, but we'd also like to induce even more stringent constraints because we have to learn how to do the harder parts. We have to experience it and be challenged by it to meet that need. And we've also stepped into the age of precision medicine, genomics. We don't necessarily need to use just epidemiology, which is studying kind of how humans as a whole respond, and then pick an average, because the average may not represent any one person. This is about understanding who we are and how we respond. And in my perspective, there's no wrong answer. I know there's lots of threats about when data gets out and how it might be misused, but the point is, we're all human and we're all fallible. You just need to understand how to support the individual and help them be the best that they can be. And that should be done through, again, a data-driven process. We can help someone understand if they need a different countermeasure, but we have to be prepared to provide that countermeasure rather than just guess everyone should get the same product. So I think this is an emerging area of science. Clearly, it's very popular. I think there's a lot of information out there that deserves a lot of scrutiny and a lot of attention, because it's opening up a whole new world of solutions. But we do have to tread very carefully, because again, it could be misused at any time if it's misunderstood. So I think it's an exciting place to spend, our scientific efforts, to understand coming back to Earth with how we are more poignant with our solutions and don't need to be as wasteful. I have a colleague, Sarah Lynn Mark, who gives some pretty interesting talks about dosages and the difference between, males and females, and that maybe we can reserve more volumes even of something like a vaccination because females don't need as high of a dose. And there's good science behind that, and maybe we need to act on it. And in spaceflight, that is even more poignant because of how constrained those resources are. You're always choosing between food, water, air, guidance and navigation. They all compete for resources to get into orbit, and you have to be very precise about the decisions you make and the data you use to get there. So I really believe human spaceflight is about inspiring and uniting. The opportunities in front of us are an amazing component. I think that I'm seeing the world come together and want to be a part of the next century's worth of activities moving into lunar orbit and sustained lunar surface operations. I love the industry that's driving down the cost and increasing the opportunities. And it's an exciting time to be part of this field. So thank you very much. And I'd like to take a moment if there are any questions. All right, Jennifer, I'm available. People can have my email if they want to follow up, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, that sounds great. And Jennifer, what a fantastic talk you just gave. So much to think about about the reality of going to space, so many things to consider. And I particularly loved what you said about Mars. You said, when we go, we go. I'm going to remember that. So we better be prepared. So thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
All right. Moving along, we have 2 more talks in this session. And now we have the privilege of listening to Mr. Umbetbayev Aminov, Deputy Director of Business Development and Strategy for KGS Kazakhstan. Mr. Aminov has worked in the space industry since 2017. He was a permanent participant in the United Nations International Arms Trade Treaty Implementation Group. He also served as a member of the United Nations Group of Governmental Experts on the Prevention of an Arms Race in Outer Space. Mr. Aminov was also a permanent participant of the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. And most recently, he is the Deputy Director of the Department of Business Development and Strategy of JSC Kazakhstan, Garish Sapari. I hope I said that right. Mr. Aminov, I hand the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miss Jennifer, for such kind of introduction. And thank you very much also for inviting. For me, it's honor to be a speaker in this GSS forum, especially on the topic of exploring the space science future together. So my presentation is mostly related to the food security agriculture sector, which is also one of the important part of all economy, I think, in this region. So I will try to share my screen. One moment. So can you see my screen, right?
Yes.
So our company, Kazakhstan Garish Sapari, is a 100% state-owned enterprise, and actually makes a lot of work in the field of agriculture. Right now we have such kind of company project. So we do have the space system of remote sensing of the Earth and high precision satellite navigation system of Kazakhstan. Also, we nearly created a ATC center together with Airbus and space system technology, which is made by our daughter company Galan. So about our spacecrafts, so we have 2 satellites, as I said before. So high resolution, which is a 1 meter resolution, and also the middle resolution with 6.5 meter multispectral mode. So sorry, my colleagues are saying that you are not seeing my presentation. I'm right or not? Sorry, one moment. I think. Sorry for this technical issue. Sorry. Yeah, this one. So here you are. Okay, so as I said before, we have 2 satellites with high resolution and middle resolution. And right now, in order to solve the economical issue, we do space monitoring in the different directions. Actually, we have tasks in 40 directions, but I summed here most of important directions in the field of agriculture and other sector of economy. So most of important is the crop monitoring, and we do also the land use, the same as the forest. And also the emergency situation is also very important to monitor in order to save the ecology and to save the people. Waste monitoring in the ecological direction. Water bodies, as you know, it's also one of the important part of the agriculture. What is our technology? So shortly saying is actually we use our own data, and also we use the commercial data, because you have to understand that with the little amount of the spacecraft, it's difficult to use the own data fully. So also we use in our technology our high navigation satellite system program. All data that are collected from the spacecrafts are analyzed and vectorized here in our company, and then they got through camera processing, and of course for higher result of verification, we do filter search. And all of this information are collected into one geodatabase and shared with the clients through internet. So I mean, most of them are state bodies. It can be also the population and businesses. Let's move to the forest monitoring. What is important is in forest monitoring, right now we work in Kazakhstan fully. We digitalized all the forest fund in Kazakhstan and its cover, which give us possibility to see the, to give the hazard level spread of the forest fires in some kind of predictions also. As I said before, we can give determine the burnt areas and give immediately information. Also, if there's some kind of areas with deforestation, we do also satellite assessment on this direction. So what about the water monitoring? So our colleagues are collecting the data from the ice period until the freezing period from one river, for example, and they make 3D modeling of that in order to see the flood situation, and we can predict the level of the water in this river or some kind of dynamics in some kind of process here. It's very important to see in every country there are some kind of water protection zones. For example, here is the example of Kazakhstan that are nearly some kind of cities or villages, etc. And here we can see if there's some extractions, or we can also give some GIS analytics, how is the condition of them. So let's move to the crop monitoring. First of all, we monitor each season from spring to the fall, and we can give its productivity, its vegetation, for example, which give us possibility to predict what's going on with the crops in each region. And one of the important things is this monitoring is available, all of these monitorings are available to work in worldwide, in every country. So let's move to the land use. So our methodology is that we see the historical data of Earth's remote sensing of some kind of plot of land, for example, and then we see integrate in geo database in order to see the borders. After that, we also in Kazakhstan integrate with cadastral data, which give us possibility to see the land registry information, also its availability and the aim of this, for example, the plot. And then we can give information to the appropriate authorities about is this plot is used or not used, or use it appropriately or not. Give some kind of statistics, which is very easy to work with these statistics. So what about waste monitoring? As you know, in most countries, this is a big problem actually. Of course, in every country they have authorized landfills, and we digitalized right now in Kazakhstan all the authorized borders of these landfills. And for example, if we see some kind of border overrun, then we immediately also inform appropriate ecological ministry and also the local authorities, so that they have to react to that. But it can be also find or determine some kind of illegal dumpings. So after that, we can see also monitor the liquidation process in what exactly status is it. After that, so about emergency monitoring. here is an example, for example, of thermal points, which gives all needed information in a geoportal for some kind of area which is burned. And after that, they're immediately monitoring of all the directions of this fire, for example. And then, as you know, after the fire, in most countries, they need some kind of information about burnt area, and most of them are made by helicopter flight or using the drones or using some kind of human powers. But here we can automatically give the burnt out area for appropriate guys, so they can save the time, first of all, and the money for some kind of helicopter flight or using the drones. Also, it can be also dangerous, for example, for the human being there. So next part will be of emergency monitoring is the flood monitoring, which is also very important. Right now, we do this process already in Kazakhstan. We digitalized, for example, buffer zone of the rivers. First of all, there shouldn't be any constructions in order to save the population. And second, if there are some constructions, then if we see some kind of overgoing of the flood border, I mean the river border, then we tell about this also immediately to emergency authorities. That gives possibility to prevent some kind of emergency situation. It was some situation nearly where we also helped to our emergency ministry to make rapid assessment of current situation of the emergency situation territory. Also, we gave the forecast of possible spread of the water, and when there began some kind of work of liquidation process after the flooding, then we gave the clarification of situation. So where is the water and in what condition is the settlements? The next one important thing is every country uses some kind of mining centers. And most of these mining centers, it can be there's some kind of violation of legislation in the form of border overrun, or not giving some kind of taxes to the appropriate authorities by taking more, for example, products, but paying less taxes. In this kind, we digitalized some kind of actual mining centers in the licensed border. And if there is some kind of issue about border overrun or some kind of illegal, for example, minings, then we also immediately give information to appropriate authorities, or it can be some kind of firms, for example, who own there. And also we give information about dynamics of changes in production. So in this area, also the liquidation work if there is something. Our monitoring system, for every monitoring system is created a separate geo-service, which gives a possibility to our clients to see immediately the situation according to their tasks. So one of the most important, so to say, directions of company is to involve the population in protect the environment. So we created some kind of app, which is available for every pupil in Kazakhstan. Right now it's only in Kazakhstan. And they can download this app, and then if they see, for example, some kind of violation in the form of deforestation, or it can be fire, or it can be some kind of waste, illegal dumpings, etc., they can immediately choose the type of report and then add the locations, for example. After that, add the media resource, taking picture or video, etc., and then adding the, so names, comments, and what time, etc., and then send this information. After the sending this information, it comes immediately to our geoportal, which is available for our Ministry of Ecology and local authorities. After getting this information, they have to in appropriate data and period, remove all these violations from this period, and in this, by working in this direction, we are hoping actually to save our environment from some kind of waste or some kind of other violations from the human part. So, what is the Perspectives project? What I want actually to invite our colleagues who is participating and who is interested. Right now, we are on the way of creation a constellation of Earth remote sensing satellite of medium resolution. The characteristics you can see here, it's planned to go up to 5-meter resolution, or maybe it will be less. But the first 3, it will be made by our republic, and it has possibility to increase the number of satellites and up to 18. So that gives possibility by investing, for example, for 3 of satellites, they will have access for all of the satellites. This is a good opportunity to create, mostly it is a good opportunity for developing countries like Kazakhstan, who wants to create their own space sector. So thank you very much. I tried to be quick and pass in a given 10 minutes. I hope I made it, and I am very open for your questions. If you don't have some questions right now, you can write my number and email and send me the appropriate information, your questions. Sorry, here's email I have to change. I think here's some kind of, so I will write to the chat my email. And once again, thank you very much for inviting, and I wish all of the distinguished delegations and participants of this event good luck, and I hope this event gives us possibility to develop our global space system in the peaceful purposes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Amanov. That was wonderful. You're doing great things, especially forest monitoring and predictive modeling and emergency monitoring and mining monitoring, and the list goes on. And this is absolutely critical information for life on Earth. Really appreciate your efforts. And also, I love your app that you've created. So thank you so much. All right, we have one more speaker with us today. We have the pleasure of hearing from Mr. Ismoil Razulov. Mr. Razulov is the head of Department of International Cooperation for Uzbek Cosmos, the Space Research and Technology Agency. He is based in Uzbekistan. Mr. Razulov, we are very pleased to hear from you now.
Dear distinguished participants of the forum, Assalamu alaikum. Taking this opportunity, I would like to welcome participants of the Global Space Science Forum and express my gratitude to ICESCO and Space Foundation on behalf of Uzbek Space Agency for the opportunity to participate in this forum. My today's topic of presentation is promoting the use of space technologies for sustainable development. Presentation outline is as follows. I'll speak about Uzbek Space Agency, the role of space technologies in sustainable development, using space data for reaching sustainable development goals, the space monitoring program of Uzbekistan, and conclusion. Certainly in the year of digital transformation, further economic development and increased competitiveness of countries on the world scene will very much depend on the effective implementation of use of space technologies. In this regard, the decree of the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan on the development of space activities in the Republic of Uzbekistan was signed in August 17, 2019, and the Space Research and Technologies Agency under the Cabinet of Ministers of the Republic of Uzbekistan was established and started functioning in September 2020. The agency is a government body responsible for the development and implementation of a unified state policy and strategic directions in the field of space research and technology. And the main priority tasks of the agency are as follows. It's formation of the legislative framework for the space industry in Uzbekistan, creation of space industry development strategy, increasing efficiency by implementation space technologies, for instance, remote sensing and UAV technologies in the sector of the economy, such as agriculture, water management, forestry, geology, ecology, cadastre, transport infrastructure, urban planning, and so on. Organization of a personnel training system for the development of the space industry, and the development of the international cooperation with other space agencies, international organizations, and private sector companies. And the main directions in the development of space industry to increase economic sector's effectiveness are remote sensing, satellite communications, navigation systems, and UAVs. And the main defined project in the development of infrastructure are construction of a satellite ground station for direct reception of remote sensing data and from foreign satellites, implementing space monitoring program, creation of geographic information system centers addressing the ministries and government offices' needs in satellite images and geoinformation data, and also creating favorable conditions for private sector, including launching incubators for space startups in Uzbekistan. As an international experience shows that the space technologies, which have reached the level of today's research in the field of spatial data, processing of space images and geographic information systems, navigation systems, and other innovation technologies, play an essential role in the sustainable development of countries. Today, applying the achievements of space research and technologies, it is possible to ensure food security, social and economic development of the country, to reduce climate change side effects, to improve natural resource management, to reduce disaster risk, to use geospatial data for identification and mapping of the renewable energy potential, and so on. Faster and more versatile digital connectivity, satellite data, geographic information systems, and spatial analysis have become increasingly accessible and available, generating more evidence-based data to support real-time decision-making. Geospatial information has also increasingly been incorporated into development planning, which has led to more accurate monitoring and evaluation of development interventions. As a result, geospatial information applications have come to play a more prominent role in the implementation and realization of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. As a result, the importance of the role of Earth observation and geolocation provided by GNSS in supporting the achievement of development goals is recognized by the United Nations. And United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, Space for Sustainable Development Goals, recommendations, and UNESCAP's Asia-Pacific Plan of Action on Space Applications for Sustainable Development as a reflection of it. These two documents could be used as a recommendation for the countries to reach sustainable development goals using space applications. Nowadays, Uzbekistan, like most countries in the world, is taking actions to meet sustainable development goals set by United Nations and witnessing numerous examples of how space technologies contribute to strengthening peace, expanding human rights, and sustainable development in the interests of the whole society. Realizing of and comprehensive measures of implementing advanced technologies in all sectors of the economy, actively develop the digital economy. Such accelerated development of advanced digital technologies is one of the main priorities of our government policy. For the implementation of these tasks, space technologies are strategic research and public administration and a solution for sustainable social economic development. In particular, the Uzbek space has already conducted several successful local projects for space monitoring program in Uzbekistan, such as Bostanlik region monitoring for cadastral forestry and environment protection purposes, where our technical team worked on discovering illegally seized plots of land, mapping forest areas, and detecting illegal solid municipal waste zones. Monitoring and mapping of the most active seismic zones of Uzbekistan from 1991 to 2021 to improve the disaster management. And also agriculture lands monitoring to map areas for crops of certain types, such as wheat, cotton, vegetables, determine their NDVI, increase productivity, and predict the amount of crop to be harvested. And also Samarkand city roads monitoring in order to determine the exact length and make a map of the existing asphalt roads and unpaved roads for further application in road construction. To conclude my speech, I would like to share my ideas on developing cooperation within the framework of ICESCO in the following areas. Develop national policies and strategies with a grand challenges approach to space science, technology, and data for the achievements of the goals that brings together governments, academia, the private sector, and civil society to take part in such activities from basic research to implementation. Share best practices on the formation of space-related policies and strategies, the development of space programs, and the utilization of space science, technology, and data for goals-related applications. Increase national support for downstream capabilities such as processing and analyzing Earth observation data that support the achievements of the goals. Encourage educational collaboration through networks of universities to build space-related capabilities. Develop space science, technology, and data capacities through trainings, courses, webinars, conferences, workshops, and so on. Support space-related startup projects through incubation and acceleration programs. And I hope for further cooperation between ICESCO member countries in the direction of practical implementation of space applications for the social economic development of the member countries, and look forward to productive and fruitful cooperation in the framework of ICESCO. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Razulov. That was so awesome and very interesting to learn about the Uzbekistan Space Agency, what fantastic goals you have to improve life on Earth, and personally, what a great way to end this session. So thank you so much. In closing out this session, I'd like to thank everyone for attending. I certainly learned a lot and hope you did as well. And I hope this session has been as inspiring to you as it was to me.